Slam.
Yes.
6th annual. This year's theme.
Who are you?
You don't know that. My name is Doug Bergstein, and I am on the board of the Valley Players Theater, and this.
Hi everybody, I'm Susan Loynd.
Guess who's in?
Also a Valley Players board member. So this year's theme, in case you didn't look at your program or see any of the advertising, I'm going to tell you, is I should not have been the one in charge. Now, you might think, oh, that's always a disaster, but not necessarily. Sometimes it is, and oftentimes it is, but not necessarily. So keep your minds open to that idea of I should not be the one in charge could have a positive ending, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Is this for me to jump in?
Yeah, this is your time.
Okay.
We rehearsed this for hours.
Yeah, that's my cue. Okay, so I thought it would be fun. I did a little research. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with AI who's with me. Yeah, like I'm interested, but I also want to tell it to F off. Exactly. So I thought it would be funny to ask AI for some opening lines of stories on this theme. And I thought it might be fun throughout the night to share a couple. So I'm just going to start with one.
Okay.
By the time I realized silence was a bad sign, the dog was wearing pajamas and the baby had a marker.
That sounds like parenting.
That
Or babysitting.
sounds like my life. Let's do one more. Okay, so this one, I like. I volunteered to organize the team, which seemed like a really good idea until I realized no one listens to the organizer. So we'll tell you a couple more as we go on, but back to you, Doug.
Okay, thanks. So I mentioned this is the 6th annual. Just a show of hands, who have been here for all, well, the first one was COVID. Okay, so who's been here for all 6? This being the 6th.
Same.
So Allison and Bill. Siobhan, okay. All right. So a few of you. So this idea actually came from Jess Tompkins, who's here. Hi, Jess. Jess, say hi. So she came to me and said, Doug, we need to do something. You know, it's the middle of COVID, everyone's getting stir crazy. So the genesis of this came from Jessica. So thanks for getting us started. And we did that first year online, which was an interesting experience, but it was great. It was great. Okay, and also another huge thanks to a woman named Sue Schmidt, who's not here. Sorry, storyteller, she's not going to make it. But she is involved in the National Goth organization, and she is an amazing listener and giver of feedback. And we were lucky to do 2 workshops with her. And Sue's going to talk about that a little bit, about how our storytellers got to the point where we are today, right now.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So, as we all know, telling stories is just such an important part of being human, and it allows us to create what I think is an often intimate connection with other people, which is pretty amazing. And this process can be a little intimidating, so I want you all to be really proud and cheer on our storytellers as they come up, because this is not easy. The idea is we have to come up with a first-person true story. So it can't be something that happened to your parents or somebody else. It has to be your story that actually happened. We're not going to fact check, but we do know who you are. Now I'm pretty close to AI, so I'm going to look it up later. But you have to write it, you got to read your story aloud to anyone willing to listen, which can be challenging. And then you have to have a willingness to what we call kill your darlings. Any English majors in the group? I was an English major. You write stuff and then you realize, this is 8,000 words. I need a 250-word essay for tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Well, that's just me. So you have to be willing to be pretty, you have to be pretty aggressive in your editing. So you have to be able to remove any superfluous information, which is pretty much all my life is superfluous information. So it's hard for me. No judgment. And you have to be really mindful of what's going to advance that storyline. So you have to leave out details that don't support that. And you have to time yourself so that it comes in between 5 and 7 minutes. And we used to have, like little noises or bells that we ring and nobody stopped talking, so we did away with that. But we ask people to time themselves, and you have to also honor the arc of the story, right? So all of this, what's the setup, what's the desire, what's the climax, what's the resolution? And it's not easy, and it takes a lot of courage. So I want you to give it up for all our storytellers tonight.
Okay, a few details about the building. This Waitsfield United Church of Christ. The bathrooms are downstairs. There's 4 of them. And if you're welcome to go during the story, but the storyteller can be able to see
Not
you.
go, but leave
Leave the theater, leave this area during the story, but we're going to see. We are going to have an intermission, and that will also be downstairs. Sharon Kellerman provided some cookies and some drinks for us. And if you would like to make a donation, that goes to the Interfaith Council that helps many things in this valley. Let's see, what else did I want to say? I wanted to say, you may be wondering why we're here and not across the street in our very own building. I'll give you a little summary of that. We had shut down for 2026 because we have some improvements to make in our building. We got a nice visit from our fire marshal who said, you need some fire doors, your wiring needs some help. We discovered some mold in our basement. We got to redo, we're throwing away a lot of costumes and props, and it's really hard to do that when you have an active theater. So we made the very difficult decision to shut down, but we wanted to continue some of the things where we didn't need a lot of time in our space to do. When Mad River's Story Slam is one of those things. We did Cabin Fever Follies last week, which was spectacular. And so, that is why we're here. One other thing I want to let you know, I asked our storytellers to respond to the question, what are you looking forward to most in springtime? And so that's, we're going to incorporate those answers as part of their introduction. And that's further ado.
very much. Okay.
I'd like to bring our first storyteller to the stage. Give it up for Danielle Duquette. Long walks on the beach. No, that's having made her first foray into Story Slam last year, Danielle's happy to be back. She says, telling a personal story is the only time I've ever felt nervous on stage. So of course I had to come back again. You are just a glutton for punishment. I love that for you. It's also truly rewarding to share and hear all these amazing stories. She, along with us, encourages each of you to consider joining us next year and telling your own story. You won't have a more supportive and receptive group than a Valley Players audience. Very true. I didn't write that, but I do agree with that. Springtime. Danielle is really looking forward to more hiking and trail running with her dog and good friends, not me, as well as getting her garden going. And now, don't mind Danielle's nerves as she shares a story that's very near and dear to her heart about the most precious gift a young girl ever received and the lengths she went to keep it.
Thank you. And I have it right now. Okay.
Okay. Oh, hold on. Tilt it a little bit.
Oh, yeah. When I was 13, my parents got divorced. After that, my father was no longer a presence in my family's life. My mother did an amazing job taking care of myself and my 3 siblings, but it was hard. Money that was tight before was even more scarce. By summer, she had to acknowledge that she couldn't keep taking care of all of us kids, plus our pets. We had dogs, cats, and 3 horses. One of the horses was my mom's, one was my sister's, and one was mine. If we wanted to keep them, she told my sister and I, we would have to cover their expenses ourselves. Now, you need to understand how important my horse was to me. Her name was Fancy, and I got her when I was 10. Her previous owner had to sell her when she was going off to college. I rode her everywhere. My favorite thing to do was to stick a book in my back pocket and just throw a halter and a lead line on her and ride her to this meadow about a mile from my house. I dropped the lead line and lay across her back, the warmth of her competing with the warmth of the sun, as I lost myself in that book. But Fancy was more than an escape. Between the angst of being a child, social awkwardness, and the difficulties around my parents' divorce, she was a source of deep comfort. I can't tell you the number of times that I sat in her manger and cried out all of my woes into her neck, while her rhythmic chewing and warm breath soothed my aching heart. I could not lose my horse. I had a job babysitting, but that wasn't going to cut it. So I spent months looking for work. Finally, at the end of the summer, I got a break. My cousin was leaving her job at a bakery, and she recommended me to take her place. I had a short interview with the owner, and honestly, though I think he gave me the job partly because of her recommendation, I think it was mostly because they were desperate. You see, his wife wanted to stop working and be home with their children. Well, I was desperate too. Eager to please, I needed to learn as quickly as I could. This was a commercial bakery that sold donuts wholesale at the local grocery stores. And as a commercial bakery, you can imagine that everything was supersized. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but I am clearly not supersized. I learned to mix the dough in the large stand mixer that sat on the floor. And I had to take the mixing bowl that held about 20 gallons, hoist it up chest height and dump it on the table to roll it out and cut it into the donuts. Those I placed on a wire sheet. It held about 4 dozen. I would take that, it was 3 by 3 foot, and set it into boiling hot oil. Once those donuts were golden brown, I learned to take them out without burning myself, somewhat, and place them into a rack to cool. The top shelf was 5 feet high. The sheer size and weight of that place was a perfect mirror to the enormity of the challenge I faced trying to keep my horse. But I learned fast. My diligence paid off, and after a couple of weeks, the owner's wife was able to stop coming in. I worked Saturdays and Sundays from 6 in the morning till about 4 at night, and most weeknights after school. My boss and I developed a good rhythm and rapport, and after a few months, I got up enough courage to suggest, hey, maybe we could open the bakery on Sunday mornings and sell retail to the church crowd. There was a display case already, a counter, and even a register. He agreed to give it a try. It wasn't long before the money we took in on Sundays was making up almost a third of the bakery's income. He added to that sheet pan brownies and pizza, which we sold to local cafes and restaurants throughout the week. With the added workload, we needed to hire a new staff person. I was responsible for training and supervising that person. Boy, was that a crash course in management for a kid overseeing the work of a 30-year-old man. He wasn't nearly as motivated as I was, and he definitely wasn't as quick. I remember one fateful day when I was trying to get him to speed up his pace. He got really frustrated with me and threatened to quit, to which I helpfully responded, "Go ahead, I'll just get your hours." You see, I never was confident that I was going to earn enough to keep my horse. After he quit, I think my boss got the idea that maybe I needed a little more training. Thankfully, I learned to tone down my management, and by the time we hired the next guy, he stuck. Over the years, Over the next few months, my boss was able to cut back a little bit on his work. And when my birthday rolled around the next year, he and his wife threw me a really nice birthday party, complete with a donut cake and a card with a $100 bill in it. It was the first $100 bill I had ever seen. Now I'm dating myself a little here, but $100 to a kid my age in the mid-'80s was a lot of money. The birthday card said, "Happy Sweet 16. The problem was I wasn't 16. I wasn't even 15. I had to tell him I was only 14. I really should not have been the one in charge. He freaked out, of course, and said, "Oh my gosh, we can't keep her. We're going to get in so much trouble." Child labor laws and all that. At the age of 13, of course, I was working far more hours than were allowed, though I had my mother's permission, unless the kid worked on a farm. I froze. I needed that job in order to keep my horse. His wife was a little bit more pragmatic and told him that if he let me go, he was going to have to find, hire, and train my replacement. I held my breath. Thankfully, pragmatism won out over fear, and I was able to stay working there, although they cautioned we weren't to discuss my age with anyone. You can imagine the sigh of relief everybody breathed. 2 years later, when I finally did turn 16. I worked there throughout my high school career, and we even hired 2 more staff who I trained and supervised, and my boss cut his work back even more. By the time I graduated and was leaving for college, he sold the business, but I never sold Fancy. I did whatever it took to keep her throughout my college years and beyond. I even have a picture of her with my firstborn child. Fancy died at the ripe age of 33. But the precious memories that I have of her still warm my heart. Thank you.
Now, I know I'm getting older, and I'm getting sappier as I get older. Crying on the first story? As my father-in-law likes to say, "Barb, what is it? Brings a tear." Okay, our next storyteller, Larry Hill, is with us for the 4th time. And over the 3 previous times, he has regaled us over and over and over with adventure stories from his life. This one is no exception. He wants you to know, very specifically, that he was nervous enough about telling this story in general. And then when he found out he was telling it in a church, well, that didn't help. The title of his story is Faith and Fear. Come on, Larry. Oh, wait. Larry, in the springtime, is looking forward to rototilling his garden. Yep, that's perfect.
It was one of those perfect spring days in Western Massachusetts. I was a senior in high school. It was 1979. And 2 of my buddies, Drew and Louie, and I decided that we should go climb Mount Washington that coming weekend. We had all been in Boy Scouts together, and I had really gotten into backpacking, and as a result, I had gotten them really into backpacking. And we had been out together quite a few times. I borrowed my parents' VW bus on Friday, and we drove up to Pinkham Notch Visitor Center at the base of Mount Washington. It was about a 4-hour drive. And slept in the bus in the parking lot. In the morning, we went into the Visitor Center, and it was bustling with people going to ski Tuckerman's Ravine, or going up to Expedition on Mount Washington, or the Presidential Range. And they were putting on really technical my ski boots. They had crampons, they had ice axes, they had ropes, they had huge backpacks. Yeah, we had Boy Scout issue camping gear. I wandered around the visitor center and came across a memorial to people who had died on Mount Washington from Waitsfield and hypothermia. And, read up a little bit on that. And honestly, we just couldn't figure out what all the fuss was about. We didn't look at the weather report, we didn't talk to anybody, and we did not register. We headed up the trail to Tuckerman's Ravine, and we were really not in very good shape. Pretty much everyone that we saw was passing us on the trail going up. And Louis was a big guy, and he smoked way too many cigarettes and drank way too much beer. And he was really struggling, so Drew and I had to wait for him regularly. The plan was to go up a trail to the left of Tuckerman's Ravine called Loynd's Head. And once you get above the tree line on Loynd's Head, you get to this, it's like a moonscape. It's the wind and the weather is so intense up there, there's no vegetation that grows whatsoever. So it was just like this field of small to mid-sized rocks, and it was very loose, and so when you were trying to walk, it was very difficult to get a good footing. There was no way to mark the trail, so they built these cairns that were like 3 feet wide and about 4 feet tall, and that's how you knew where to go. You followed this kind of across this open field of rocks. The higher we got, the colder it became. We had every piece of clothing that we had with us on by the time we got halfway across Loynd's Head shoulder. And then it started to snow. And when we got through Loynd's Head, back into the area where there was some vegetation and the trail had been marked with blazes on the ground, on ledge on the ground, the snow had covered everything, so we immediately lost the trail. We wandered around trying to find it and really just didn't have any luck. And eventually just decided we should pitch the tent and spend the night there. It was incredibly calm. The snowflakes were like these leaves in the fall just floating down. It was beautiful. It was just a really, really beautiful night. Well, it wasn't quite a night yet, but it was getting there. And we made ourselves some macaroni and cheese and climbed into the tent and went to sleep. During the night, the wind picked up and the temperature plummeted. Our tent blew over, so we were laying in our sleeping bags. Drew and I sort of upgraded our sleeping bags a little bit, so we had like mummy bags, but Louis was still in a cotton Boy Scout bag, and he was in the middle, and you could feel him shivering all night long. In the morning, when the light came, we all knew that we needed to get down, that we didn't really have to say it to each other, we just needed to get out of there. We got dressed in the tent, all of our clothing had frozen, with the tent flapping over you, trying to figure out how to get your clothes on, it was panic-inducing. The wind was so loud that you couldn't hear each other, you couldn't hear anything, really. And we did the best we could to stuff all of our gear into our backpacks and headed back down the way we thought that we were supposed to go. It took us a while to get to the beginning of the moonscape of Loynd's Head. By the time we got there, every bit of exposed skin was burning or numb. And Louis and Drew were really slowing down. Like the way they were moving was just really didn't make a lot of sense. They were stumbling and really having a hard time. I was yelling that we have to keep going. We made it out across the opening to the first cairn, and they immediately sat down behind it and closed their eyes and just said, we just need to rest. And I was starting to freak out. And I eventually coerced them them to make it to the second cairn, and then they became almost unconscious, almost unrevivable. I was shaking them, and I remember that I read at the base that first signs of hypothermia are, lethargy, sleepiness, and dementia. And I realized that if I left them there, or if I let them rest, we would probably all die here. I was kneeling in front of them, begging them to move, and getting no response whatsoever. The sky was an insanely intense, crystal clear blue, and these perfect white puffy clouds were rocketing by at impossible speed, as if someone had hit the fast forward button on the CD player by accident. I realized in that moment that I was the inexperienced backpacker they had been talking about at the base. And I had no idea what to do. Now, my relationship to God back then was complicated. I had kind of grown up in a church that was a lot like this. I was very close to the reverend of our Protestant church. He had helped me through a very, very difficult time when I was pretty young, and he was like a father to me. His name was Clark Schaff, but I called him Schaffsy. There were a lot of things about Christianity that I really liked. The community, a lot of my friends were associated with the church. A lot of my life was associated with the church. But I really struggled. I was very skeptical about Christianity itself. It just seemed too perfectly contrived to not be invented by mankind, and to help people deal with the incredible fear that this life is probably the only one we're going to get. And they really don't have that much control over it. A lot of it is just random fate. I was much more interested and attracted to Buddhism and American Indian religions and beliefs and spirits, but I had no idea if being raised a Christian would ever make those possible for those to be my God. I knew I believed in something. My faith was very important to me, but I just had no idea what it was. I am now 65 years old. I have only prayed a very few times in my life. Up there on Mount Washington that day, with my two friends leaning against those rocks, was the first time for me. Whoever you are, whatever you are, if you are there, please help me get them down. I became a man possessed. I was shaking them and slapping them, trying to get them to respond with no luck. Eventually I realized that I would have to carry their backpacks myself to the next cairn and then come back and get them individually. I put my backpack on, put their two backpacks sort of on my forearms, and stumbled to the next cairn, put those down, came back, and Drew was able to revive enough to be able so we could walk together. And together we made it to the next cairn, and then I came back for Louis. Louis was acting like he was really drunk. He was mumbling, he wasn't making any sense, he couldn't really stand up, and I realized I'm going to have to carry him. And I pulled him onto my back fireman style and stumbled to the next cairn. Then I put on the backpacks, went to the next cairn, went back for Drew, and came back for Louis. It's hard to say how long we did this. It seemed like a long time. But every time we made it a little further down, the wind became a little bit less, and they both became a little bit more lucid. Eventually, And before long, well, actually, it was a long time, but we did eventually get down below the trees, into the safety, and out of the wind. And I remember thinking that it just didn't seem real. Like, did that really just happen to us? Did we almost just die? At the visitor center at the base, I went in to check the weather report, and the wind had been a steady 75 miles an hour and was gusting to almost 100 miles an hour. And with the wind chill, the temperature was negative 60 degrees Fahrenheit. It was a long, quiet ride home. Later that week, I went to see Shotzi, and I told him my story, complete with my fears and my tears and my first prayer. And he looked at me in that wise, kind way and said, "Larry, there may be hope for you yet."
Note to self, never travel with Larry. Because people say that about me, so I can't judge. But you lived, and that's good. We're happy for that. So our next storyteller is Bobby Roode. Come on down. Bobby Roode is Waitsfield. With her husband, I love this for you, 2 hens, and a newly adopted senior dog named Clayton, who we heard of. We did hear Clayton on our call, didn't we? She was a school counselor in Vermont for over 20 years and then earned her MSW at UVM and practiced as a licensed therapist for another 10 years before retiring. She will never stop learning and blooming and hopefully inspires us and others. Bobby's here for the second time, and what she loves about springtime, I love this for you, long walks and single layers.
Yeah.
Let's hear it for single layers. Bobby's story is called Pom Poms Optional.
Well, our next to follow. So it's 1980, and I had my first job as a school counselor. I was so excited. I was living in the valley at the time, and my husband is an architect, and he was building one of his first houses, and I ended up getting a job in the Northeast Kingdom. That was what I was offered, and I said, okay, I gotta get started. We were both newly with our professional careers, and this was the beginning. So I went up and I found a little apartment in Orleans that I cleaned up and made into a home, and I expected to be there during the week, and then I figured every Friday night I'd head back to the valley and work on the house. And so took off for school the first day, and in my office just kind of getting settled, and a group of girls came by and said they wanted to talk to me, and I thought, oh, it could have happened already, how am I going to help them? And they said, well, the other guidance counselor was kind of our advisor. Oh, who are you? Oh, we're the cheerleading squad. I said, cheerleading squad? What does that have to do with guidance counseling? Maybe it looks good on your transcript that you're a cheerleader, but I've never been a cheerleader. I don't know anything about cheerleading. How can I possibly help these girls? And I said, well, let me think about it. I'm not really sure. I was thinking, well, the other guidance counselor did it. And she wasn't, really a cheerleader type either. But I don't have any training in this. I learned about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And, what do I know about cheerleading? And, really, when I was in high school, and then I started to cringe and remember why I was slightly afraid of high school students. And what am I doing in this? I was going to do bibliotherapy with young elementary age children. And here I am in high school with kids asking me to be their advisor about cheerleading, about which I know nothing about. And, you know, when I think back to high school, I was a quiet kind of B+ student. I didn't have the top grades, but I was pretty smart. I liked to read. I went to dance class. I watched soap operas after school on TV. I mean, I lived a kind of quiet, sedentary sort of life. And one time I decided to come out of my shell, and I decided I'm going to try out for the twirlers. And I got all cracked up, and I had like this little toy baton. I didn't realize they had special weighted batons. And I learned all the routines, and you know, and I went and I tried out, and I think I dropped it, and I tripped, and something else happened, and I didn't make it. And you know, and this was my memory of like, well, it was my one foray into stardom, and I didn't make it. And I remember like walking home from school and seeing my mother's car parked in a friend's driveway. My mother was a new real estate agent, and she was showing the house to a client. And I stormed into the house, not realizing what was going on. It's unfair, nothing will work out for me ever. And my mother just kind of almost killed me. But needless to say, when we both calmed down, she said, well, you know, nothing to be ashamed of. We're just late bloomers in our family. Bloomers? I don't want to be a late bloomer. Meanwhile, my attention goes back to these girls, and now I'm remembering another memory when I was in summer camp, and we had the color war games, and the baseball coach didn't play me at all in the game the whole time. And I really wasn't crushed. I was kind of relieved until somebody said, well, no, they have to play everybody. And the counselor just kind of looked at me and went, shh. And that was the end of my athletic career. So, you know, there I am thinking about these girls, and I said, well, come back tomorrow and I'll let you know what I'm thinking. And they came back the next morning, and of course, at this point I sort of thought about it. I thought, well, what do I have to offer them? Wait, I know one cheer. I can teach them. Go back into the woods, because you haven't got the goods. And I thought, okay, I'm going to teach them this is going to be really great. You know, I'm going to be a helpful coach. And so I started talking to the girls. I said, well, what's involved? And they said, well, you really don't have to do anything. We just need to have you as our advisor, because we can't be cheerleaders if we don't have an advisor. And we really need an advisor because everybody else said no. And I said, well, okay, I can do this thing. I can help them. And I can teach you guys a cheer. Well, no. We know the cheers. You don't need to teach us a cheer. You just need to be there. And so I said, okay. And then afterward, you know, what they didn't tell me was I had to be there every Friday night, and I had to be there every weekend, and even at away games, especially at away games. And so it was a big commitment. But I said, okay. And I had made a commitment. And so the girls were very happy, and then the next thing they said was, well, now we have to have tryouts. And there's a couple of girls that are interested in trying out this year because we lost a few who graduated. And I said, okay, great, let's get together. We had practice sessions. And the first practice session, a girl, I'm going to call her Amanda, showed up. And Amanda was kind of small and a little bit awkward and a little bit slow, but she kind of reminded me of somebody else. And, you know, and then I started thinking, oh, this is it. This is my mission as a guidance counselor. I am going to teach these girls to be ecumenical and wonderful and kind to each other. Meanwhile, the team came to me after the first practice and said, Amanda has to go. Amanda cannot be part of our team. And they said, she's very slow. She's slow at school. She's slow in her classes. And she stumbles all the time, and she's just not any good. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but everybody who comes to practices has to have a chance to try out. Oh, no, they said, no, you have to discourage her right away. She has to leave. We can't have Amanda. And I said, well, It's Amanda or me. You can't have me if you don't allow Amanda to come to the practices and try out like everybody else. And they looked at me and they said, well, we can't get another advisor now. We tried everybody else. They said, no, you're the only one, and we can't be cheerleaders if we don't have you. So that was it. So, begrudgingly, we had more practices and we had tryouts. Now, Amanda wasn't completely without an understanding of what was going on. She was pretty insightful and came to me and said, you know, I know those girls don't like me, and I don't really want to be here, and I don't really belong. And I said, no, you're doing really great, and you're coming to all the practices, and you're perfectly entitled to try out. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, this is why guidance counselors can't be cheerleading. And this is going to not work out really well at all. But in fact, we continued on. Amanda tried out, and then the girls came to me and they said, oh, she wasn't that bad. Actually, she's pretty good. She's got a lot of spirit. And the other girl that we were talking to can't do it. So, okay, Amanda joined the team. Then the next thing they told me was, now we have to raise money for our uniforms. You want to raise money for your uniform? We're going to have to make sales. This isn't going to work. No, we'll have a bottle drive. I said, a bottle drive? We'll be driving around for hours. We'll get all these dirty bottles. And then what do we do? Anyway, they won. We had the bottle drive. A couple of parents showed up with their vehicles, and they all went routes that they knew. And of course, I had Amanda. And so Amanda and I went to a couple of houses, and somebody came out with a little baggie full of bottles, and another place said, no, we don't have any. And I was getting pretty discouraged and just kind of thinking, this is what I'm spending on Saturday doing. I could be home, helping finish sheetrock. Amanda then said, oh, I know a house where they always have a lot of bottles. I don't know how she did that, but anyway, a lot of bottles. And they did. They had a whole shed full of bottles, and they said we could have them all if we took them away. It was eureka. We had pay dirt. We were rich in bottles. And when we joined the other people at the end of the day, we had enough bottles to pay for their costume, for their uniforms that they wanted. They weren't really extravagant. And so that was it. And so we started to go to the games. And I wasn't much of a basketball fan before it started, but in the end, I kind of liked basketball. And I didn't mind giving up my Friday nights and driving back to the valley on Saturday mornings. It was better anyway. And then some of the weekends, I really liked staying there anyway. And I think there was one game that I missed, and I heard there was some sort of a brawl, but it didn't involve the girls. So that was okay. And it was amazing to me, we had this experience. And then I started thinking, when I started remembering this story, and I thought that nobody had ever really supported me. Well, my mother had always called me kind of a late bloomer, or, if I got irritable, I was overtired. And I didn't always feel, they loved me. My parents really loved me, but they didn't always get me. And they didn't always understand what it was that I needed. And I really didn't need to be a late bloomer. I needed to be part of what was going on. And then I started thinking of the people that, did along the way encourage me to do some of the things I was interested in, like drama club, like citizenship committee. Each of these little things along the way, a little notch, and my self-esteem went up just a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. And I felt better about myself. And that's really part of the whole guidance scene. That's what we're trying to do and help kids feel they belong. And at the end of that year, the kids came to me at the end of the season and they said, we're so glad you made us take Amanda. She was so great. She was such an asset. She was so spirited, and we really, really like her. And I felt like, okay, I won. And the best part was, I didn't have to cheer. All I had to do was be there and make sure that they did.
So many of you know I retired from sometimes you're not that thorough in your preparation, and you know you shouldn't have been the one in charge when you're presenting a new game, and you've quickly read through the directions, and you're presenting it to the kids, and everyone's looking at you like, you don't get it. And neither do I. All right. Our keeper of the house, Mark Wilson. He's right at home here because, you know, he runs the show and does everything from toilet cleaning and chief washer? Bottle washer, yeah. So he does it all. He's got an office right there in that corner. It's true. We are incredibly thankful for his help in setting up this amazingly working sound system. And he certainly got experience with doing that. So joining us for the first time since our inaugural, our online version, we have Mark Wilson with A Mighty Wind.
What's he like about spring?
Fishing season.
Oh, I did forget that. What he's looking forward to most about spring is fishing.
A mighty wind. Even the old phrase, chief cook and bottle washer, does not adequately describe the absolute, all-encompassing factotum nature of being a small church pastor. On any given day here, I might be printing and folding Sunday worship bulletins or programs for the Story Slam when you run out of programs. Hosting a meeting of the Interfaith Council, purchasing and moving a 17-foot tall Christmas tree here into the sanctuary, consoling a grieving widow, plunging toilets clogged by you, members of the general public. Always a good time. Or finding words to express the ineffable mysteries of the Trinity. As one of my colleagues said, small church pastoring is 5% theology and 95% moving chairs. Truer words were never spoken. It is often very process-driven, very administrative work, certainly nothing they teach you in the seminary, and I love it. I wouldn't be doing anything else. I can't imagine doing anything else, which I guess is why it's a calling. What I could not have imagined, however, even in my most feverish prayers, was the moment 10 years ago now, in 2016, when I found myself on my knees being yelled at from behind by 60s folk icon Noel Paul Stookey, the guy who put Paul in Peter, Paul, and Mary. How, I wondered in that moment, and maybe he did too, how did I get here? Rewind the tape 20 years from that moment back to Bangor Theological Seminary in Bangor, Maine, in the mid-90s. At the time, Elizabeth Bannard Stookey, also known as Betty and Paul's wife, was taking classes there. And every now and again, you'd see Noel Paul, which was what we called him, because I think that might have been what Betty called him. Every now and again, we'd see Noel Paul tooling around campus, driving over from their home in Blue Hill to meet her or to pick her up and take her home. How many times must a man look up before he can see the sky? Just once, it turns out, if you're driving a brand new Mercedes convertible, which was what Noel Paul was driving. Eventually, Betty Stookey transferred her credits and got her Master of Divinity degree. That's what they call it, the degree we get Master of Divinity at Harvard and was ordained in the United Church of Christ and was hired as chaplain at the Northfield Mount Hermon School. No Christmas tree moving. No toilet plunging for Reverend Betty. She missed out, really, I think. She missed out. After that was over, wondering what to do next, she and Noel Paul came up with a multi-faith program of readings and music titled One Light, Many Candles. And they shopped it around to anyone who would have them. It was, as the title more than suggests, your basic saccharine religious pablum. For $2,500 plus expenses, you could have Reverend Betty Stuckey comment earnestly, even breathlessly quote Gandhi and King, which no one would have shown up for. But you could also be in the same room with her husband, Noel Paul Stuckey, 60s folk icon and music legend, which it turns out a lot of people would still show up for. There was a guy in the Waterville, Maine United Church of Christ named Steve Meyerhands. Good guy. He and his wife owned apple orchards in central Maine. And he really wanted this to happen. He really wanted one light, many candles to come to the Waterville UCC Church. And so in the fine tradition of religious communities everywhere, everyone thought it was a good idea. No one volunteered to help. And the pastor was the one to handle the details. One of which was a decent working sound system, which at the time the church did not possess. The Lord works in mysterious ways, it is often said, which, like the Lord helps those who help themselves, is not actually in the Bible. But as the kids might say, it's Bible adjacent. More often than not, those mysterious ways are due to a savvy, canny pastor pulling levers behind the scenes. It's not manipulation, it's strategy. The best of us don't ever get caught. At the time, I was trying to lead the Waterville, Maine United Church of Christ out of their 14,000 square foot building, which was built around the time Peter, Paul, and Mary were topping the charts. And I knew that whatever was next for them, it would require a portable sound system. So I used the upcoming arrival of Noel Paul and Reverend Betty Stuckey as leverage for purchasing a fine new Yamaha sound system, costing much more than their $2,500 fee, even with expenses. I got speakers and microphones and cables and stands and a monitor and an amp and a soundboard. The problem was, with one light, many candles soon to blow into town, we had no one to operate the system. No one to run a soundboard for 60s folk icon Noel Paul Stuckey. Who would do this? Yeah, you know who. You know who. Well, day arrived right on time. Noel Paul Stuckey and Reverend Betty Stuckey arrived from Blue Hill. And I took note that Noel was a tall and imposing man, as you might imagine, seeing him on stage. And I resisted the urge to sing A Mighty Wind from that folk music mockumentary of the same name under my breath. A mighty wind's a-blowing across the land and across the sea. Yes, a mighty wind's a-blowing, it's blowing you and me. We had their Waldorf chicken salad and their cheese and cracker plate and green grapes ready for them in the church's green room, which doubled, when not the green room, as the choir room. And we gathered in a backstage huddle, and Betty said a prayer worthy of a program titled One Light, many candles. And then it was time for the sound check. If Noel Paul had any reservations about why the pastor was running his soundboard, he was kind enough not to express them. Until I made some kind of mistake. I forget now what exactly it was. I was adjusting some level or some gain knob, and everything went all Jimi Hendrix feedback. And being strictly an acoustic guitar man, Noel Paul took umbrage, and his facade broke, and I saw him in that moment for what he was. You have to be a bastard to make it in the music business. And that's a fact, John Lennon said. John Lennon. You have to be a bastard to make it in the music business. And the Beatles, he said, are the biggest bastards on earth. In an instant, Paul was standing behind me, a mighty wind of his own. Bellowing, towering, looming, accusing me of attempting to surreptitiously record the performance. As if there was a whole underground network of folks, Grateful Dead style, passing around bootleg tapes of various performances of One Light, Many Candles. Oh man, it was like Altadena 72. Is that a recording device? He boomed. Intimidated by many things, his size, his voice, his experience, his legendary status, his history, folk music icon, Noel Paul student. I began to stammer a reply, which seemed to convince him even more in that moment that I was indeed, in fact, surreptitiously recording a performance. And it was at that moment that I realized that while I was good enough at moving chairs, the answers to running a soundboard for a celebrity musician were still, for me, blowing in the wind. Is that a recording device? He bellowed again, an echo of his first thunder. Finally, I managed to get out, no. We have a new sound system, and I just haven't gotten the hang of it yet. Well, the fact that we had purchased a new sound system just for that evening seemed to mollify his ego a little bit, and he calmed down, and he kind of reset. He reset. He said, Mark, there are a lot of things about this sound system that neither one of us knows. Okay, fair enough. For copyright reasons, of course, Noel Paul Stuckey couldn't play and sing a lot of the music that many folks, despite being warned of the fact, many folks thought that they were going to come and hear. But for $2,500 plus expenses, your church could have his name on your sign, and people, way more folks than we would see even on Christmas Eve, people would come and hear this Noel Paul. For the record, he did sing Blowin' in the Wind, which evidently Bob Dylan had told him that he could sing as he pleased. And he sang the wedding song, which he wrote. You know the song, right?
Yes.
As it was in the beginning, so it will be till the end. Woman takes her life from man and gives it back again. And everyone sang along, smiles on their faces, and just for a moment, there was indeed one light and many candles. And there was love. Yes, there was love.
Thank you, Mark. All right, so then you got to talk about being a teacher. Now, I've got a couple of juicy HR one-liners. I worked in HR, I guess I still do, technically, many This is my opening story. I'm gonna go home and write the rest of it. I agreed to facilitate the team building retreat, which felt like a great idea, right up until someone cried during my icebreaker. I took charge of the office holiday party, which is how we ended up with no food and a very intense trivia competition. I volunteered to lead a culture-building activity which immediately divided the room into people who love trust falls and people who clearly don't. I said, this shouldn't take long, which is how I found myself 2 hours deep into a conversation about tone in emails. Next up we have Sue Richardson. Come on down. Sue comes all the way from Beverly, Mass, or as we say, Beverly. Beverly. There's no word there, it's just Beverly. Beverly, Mass. And she was a resident of the Mad River Valley many years ago. And she just can't seem to stay away from us. He turned it back up to our special storytelling events. This is your 4th one. She claims she wouldn't be the person she is today if it weren't for her older siblings. You might remember her other stories. 11? Did you have 11 brothers and sisters? Yeah, that's a lot. I still remember the whole list. No, I'm just remembering, I remember your story about the toenails. Bad breath and toenails in a shared bed. That's a story for a cocktail. It stayed with me, so that's what I'm wondering. Those siblings had a huge impact on it. And also the condom and seed, that was her springtime comment is, this spring you're looking forward to picking flowers with your sisters to use in your tea bag art greeting cards. You have to ask her what the hell that is, because it's very interesting actually. I'll tell you later over a cocktail. Please welcome Sue Richardson with the sponge.
I grew up in the 60s with 10 little siblings and an 18-year age gap between me and my oldest brother. It was really easy to become invisible. I would sit with my 2 sisters, Beth and Claire, at the kids' table in the living room, where we became really skilled at hiding our peas under the rug. My other siblings sat in the kitchen with 10 people, sat comfortably with mom and dad on the head of the table and everybody else there, and they would sit there and their conversations would go on and on, these exaggerated stories. And they'd argue about how it was supposed to go. That's not how it went. You're leaving out the details. What are you talking about? And they'd go on and on and on. They were really crazy. But all I could do was sit there at my kids' table, right, and just become the sponge to understand who my siblings really were. They were crazy. Yeah. So Halloween was especially crazy in the house. My mom one year decided that we're going to have a big Halloween party. House was all decorated, all cool, ready to go. And my sister spawned of my brother Bill to dress him up because he wanted to go as a drag queen. And they were like, oh, get to dress him up again like when he was a little kid. Like, whatever. And then my sister Carolyn shows up as a prostitute with a baby mattress strapped to her back. Yeah, I can't make this stuff up, I'm not kidding you. Christmas was especially memorable for us. I remember Christmas Eve, we'd run to Dad's sock drawer and take out the biggest stretched out sock we could find, and we'd literally hammer it right to the bookcase that flanked the fireplace. Or the next morning, we'd get up in the morning, have breakfast, and then we'd all open our stockings together. As years went by, we were able to put our own little gifts into the stocking. Well, this was no holds bar competition for us now, that my parents never censored what we put in those stockings. And we did whatever we could to embarrass the crap out of each other. Well, I remember my brother Bill, he got his first, he pulled out his first magazine, it was a Playboy magazine. And his eyes were like, oh my God. And he opens up the book and he found out that somebody had put electrical tape on all the naked parts. I'm telling you, he was so mortified, and he tried, every time he tried to tear it, and it just, the laughs when we were together were infectious. They really were. My brother Bill was especially the best, loudest laugher in the family. He would go to a comedy club with us, and he would laugh at every nuance of every comedian. And, I mean, tears pouring down his face, and nobody knew what the heck was so funny. They were just busy laughing at him. Well, we took him to Soupy Sales one time, and he was laughing so hard, Soupy Sales had asked him to go on tour with him. So that people could actually figure out what the heck is so funny about his jokes. Whatever. So that was really cool. One thing that we always did was that everybody got in trouble. Everybody. And there was, my parents always knew that there was something, what's going on here. They just had a way about them. I don't know. Eyes in the back of my head, they'd say, whatever. So my brother George came home from the Marines, and he was home from on leave, and he wanted to show us his accuracy skills with shooting a gun. So what's he do? He comes into the house with all these sandbags and brings them all down to the basement and shoves them into the fireplace, right? And he invites us all down, come on, let's have a try this, I'll show you how it goes, right? So I'm the first one to shoot the gun, and I shoot it, it's so loud and so powerful, I'm like, I'm out of here. I go running back upstairs, and I'm like, I'm not doing this. Well, next thing I know, I can hear a couple of gunshots here and there, or whatever, and next thing I know, all my siblings are running upstairs with sandbags, and I'm scared to death, right? I'm like, uh-oh, something happened. It wasn't until that night at dinner. We're all sitting around, and my father says, so what happened to the little glass window on the furnace downstairs? And my brother George says, well, I was trying to clean my BB gun and it went off. Well, that didn't hold water because milk came pouring out of Bill's nostrils. And we all laughed like crazy. It was so funny. Anyways, with all my siblings, my parents, we had a family full of love, laughter, respect, but one thing we didn't have is longevity. My mom passed away at the age of 70. My dad passed away at the age of 75. My sister Ellen passed away at the age of 51. My sister Cynthia passed away at the age of 55. Bill ended up having terminal disease, and his wife Kathy invited us over for dinner one evening. And with all these people dying, it was like it doesn't seem right, nobody knows how to act around each other anymore. It's like it's just so solemn and sad. So she invites us over for one last spaghetti dinner with him. He had days to live. And again, we didn't know how to act. We just like walking around like zombies, like this is terrible. All of a sudden, my sister Paula, pulls me into the kitchen and says, you gotta fix this. I said, what do you mean I gotta fix this? Why me? Why are you putting me in charge? She says, because you're the one who's a teacher and you can come up with something really creative to get us out of this mood. I said, so I'm sitting there like, oh my God, the pressure. And all of a sudden it came to me, like, okay, Kathy, come back in here, give me a bunch of paper and a bunch of pens, and I made these strips of paper, right? Then I called all my siblings into the kitchen, and I said, I want you to each write down one sentence of one memory that you had with the family. So they all did that. We folded them up and put them in a bowl and handed them to my brother Bill. And what happened was Bill would have to read the sentence, and then my sibling, whoever wrote that sentence, would have to tell that story. What was, what was whole memory there? Tell us about that. Well, just as I suspected, it didn't take long where they were saying, wait a minute, that's not how it went. And they would tell their own version of the story. And we laughed and laughed for over an hour. It was great. It was so amazing. Anyways, we gave our brother a final hug goodbye and all went our own ways. The next morning, I got a call from my sister-in-law, Kathy, and she said, yeah, Bill just wanted you to know that he felt like he lived through his own week last night, and it was awesome. And I said, wow, that's pretty cool. But, that was the whole point, was just change the mood, just do something cool. So even though I was, I guess it was pretty good that I was the sponge growing up and learning about all this craziness of my family, because it helped to clean the way for us to make dying easier for all of us involved. Thank you.
One thing that's amazing going through, you just heard 5 stories, and I've heard those 5 stories. I've heard them at least twice, and I've read them, but tonight they were different. And the evolution of that story writing is phenomenal. So we're going to take a 12.75 minute break, because 15's too many, 10's not enough. Refreshments are downstairs, so through this door down the stairs, all the way into the cafeteria, the reading area, the village meeting house, and then their bathrooms are down there. Okay.
Nobody on the pre-med committee, I was quickly rejected by all 23 schools. I did, luckily, also apply to one French medical school in Lille and was accepted. I had to quickly learn French, and I studied like crazy. I papered my walls with my rejection letters. I had no time to see Europe, no money, no time, but in 2 years I was able to transfer into the 3rd year of a respectable medical school in New York. After that 3rd year, I had a month's vacation. I decided it was flush with cash from a scholarship from the Indian Health Service, and I decided to go back to Europe and walk the streets of Lille a free man. I visited a few old haunts and reconnected with 2 French families that have been very good to me. But I also wanted to visit a young French woman who had befriended me while I was in there for 2 years. And because back in '76, there were no cell phones, students didn't have telephone lines, so I just knocked on her door and was informed by her roommate that she was in Edinburgh, Scotland for the semester. And if I wanted to go visit her in Edinburgh, she'd probably be glad to see me. So I had 2 weeks to kill now, and I decided that I also had a Eurail pass and a book called Let's Go Europe, 800 pages of everything you need to know about the entire continent. So I got out my Eurail pass, went across the to Scotland. I booked a B&B and went directly to the address that they gave me for Sylvie. She greeted me at the door warmly, and we went off to a pub where she said we have 2 hours to visit because she has to meet up with her boyfriend. So I was alone in my B&B. I had to figure out what to do with my trip, so I got up the Let's Go Europe, and in the very spin section on Scotland said that if you only have a few days to spend in the Highlands, you should head to the Isle of Skye, the magical Isle of Skye. So I got on my Eurail pass, plotted a route to Malé on the shore of the west shore of Scotland, so I could get a ferry to Skye, and traveled on a rail line that is called the West Highland Line, and it is known as possibly the most scenic rail line in the world. It's also later appeared as in all 7 Harry Potter movies. I just sensed that something magical was going to happen. So I got to Malé, crossed over to Skye, and landed in a little town called Armadale, and found a bus, and was able to get a ride to Brodford, the nearest town. But halfway to Brodford, on a little one-lane road, I came across a fresh and really grisly accident on the highway. 2 cars had collided head-on. Possibly 6 people were injured. There was lots of blood, lots of obvious injuries, and everybody could speak, but nobody had anything interesting to say. So the road was impassable, and it was quickly decided that with my 3 years of medical school, I should be in charge. So I didn't, there was a first aid kit on the bus, and I was able to bind up some wounds, and I also told a couple of dazed, confused, pale people to just please lie down. At that point in my medical training, I at least knew that the real life-threatening injuries are typically internal, and you can't be distracted by blood. So eventually, an ambulance did come. I explained to the ambulance driver that I was a mere medical student. But I said, I think these are the 2 sickest people, and he basically didn't disagree, packed them up and disappeared. Eventually a second ambulance came, actually from the mainland on a different ferry, and then the original ambulance came back for a third load, and then a tow truck, and they cleared the road. We went into town, I found a B&B, and I asked the proprietor where I can get a drink. Which history repeats itself. So I went, this is where it gets good. I went into town, and this bar she recommended was sort of half full, so I sat at the bar myself. I have a problem in that I'm 100% deaf in my left ear. I'm blind in my left eye. and I just don't do well at bars. But I'm sitting there, drinking a beer, and this absolutely stunningly attractive woman comes past me with this really sweet Scottish accent if the seat next to me was taken. And it's... So she, imagine she's on my good side. So she sits down, and I'm terrible at bar talk. I just can't do it. But I said, this woman is sent from heaven, and I have to say something. And so I finally managed to get up. Excuse me, I just got in town. Do you know any good place to eat? And she said, are you American? And I go, yeah. Are you a doctor? I go, yeah. Well, I'm a medical student. She said, were you at that crash scene this afternoon? And I said, yeah, how'd you know? And it turns out she worked at the local 20-bed hospital, and where there's only a solitary surgeon who runs everything. And apparently there had been absolute mayhem. There was a helicopter coming, because they got all 6 of the casualties, and they got 1 doctor. And then he decided that the people that I had triaged were appropriate with the ones that should be flown out first. And then he was able to take care of the other 4 himself. But in the meantime, I had become this mysterious hero on the island. And I'm just sitting there drinking my beer. And she says, you've got to go meet Mr. Ball. And so the next morning I get up and I go to the hospital, and I'm informed that the 2 people that they flew out were immediately rushed to theater, and they both are probably going to survive. And by the way, there's all kinds of strange things when you get into the British healthcare system. Surgeons are doctors that get qualified as surgeons, and they become Mr. And even weirder, if you're a woman doctor, you become Mrs. or Miss again. It's an honorific thing. And theater is the O. So, and also Mr. Ball said that, the hospital functions is ideally with 2 medical students. And, if you would like to come back, we would love to have you. And so please, write, and we'll work something out. And so I spent the next 2 days, I rented a car, I traveled around the island, and developed what they call, the locals there call sky fever, which I still have a bad case of. It's incurable. It's just a magical place. So, 4th year of medical school is completely electives. Mostly electives anyway. So I was able to plug into my schedule 2 months working with Mr. Ball and Sky, and then it would work out that I would just fly home and graduate. So I was fading of my medical school years. But let me see. So I did indeed come back the next spring, and I was greeted at the door by a young nurse who was to become my girlfriend. And she showed me my room, and actually she found some dinner, supper in the kitchen. It's a little tiny hospital. And showed me my room, and the next morning I got up and finally connected with Mr. Ball, who said that there's no time for small talk, we've got work to do. And we just, it was total immersion. I found myself in the operating room that morning, operating, assisting him. And we typically, in the morning, would either be in theater, rounding, or the medical students who were expected to do some dirty work. scut work, they call it, just to earn our pay, starting IDs, drawing blood, that sort of thing. But the cool thing is in afternoons, you'd be in clinic and you meet all kinds of colorful people from the island. But even better, he'd drive around the island doing what everybody calls domiciliary visits. So, it's the house calls. So there you'd be, there was at times I was in thatched houses of crofters where the peat fire is always lit, and you can't leave without somebody saying, "Will you be having a wee drum, doctor?" And then once we were helicoptered far out to sea where they were building a enormous offshore oil platform, and there was another. Mr. Ball also had a thing where he always found an excuse to drop into the large manor house on the island and have a wee drum. and I got that schmooze with multiple really impressive aristocratic types, and it was just terrific. The hospital staff was a very welcoming, gregarious bunch. I forget what I was going to say after that. But the point is, after I was interviewed on the BBC, they thought that this was just a great story, this American medical student just wandering around, confused. And anyway, I flew home for graduation, and I'll confess that I was pretty satisfied with myself that my 4 years of medical school had been just so much better than those poor souls that endured 4 years in the 1970s Bronx. So thank you very much.
But it makes me laugh. This is why I should be in charge. I said that I would handle all the reservations, and that is how 6 people ended up with 1 bed and a chair. People that travel with me aren't laughing right now. Next up, we have Siobhan Travers. Come on in. Says here, you're a glutton for punishment. No, you're a glutton for storytelling. That's what I meant to say. You've participated in every single one of our story slams. You'll mostly see Siobhan hanging out at the Joslin Memorial Library. Do you shush people, by the way?
I do not.
Thank God. I have some trauma around that, not surprisingly. Thank goodness things have changed. Anyway, she loves, wait, that's not you. Lost my place, I'm sorry. Maybe you've caught one of her creations at the Valley Players Theater. Yes. Yep. She is a lady about town for sure. And in springtime, one, double with that. And 2, get your minds out of the gutter. Holy cow. We're in a church, people. Wow. Where was I? What you like about springtime is wearing shorts and taking some long-distance bicycle rides. Yes. And Siobhan's story is an Italian nightmare.
You know, as I was listening to Bill's story, I was wondering, cross paths in Scotland because my story also starts in Scotland, and I think it was right around the same year. So 50 years ago, that's 1976, my best friend Jeanette and I were living in Edinburgh, Scotland, and we were taking college courses at the University of Edinburgh. Now, Jeanette and I were quite the dynamic duo when we got together. We loved to laugh really loudly. At our home college, we used to get kicked out of classes for laughing too much. We also really enjoyed spontaneous adventure. And we didn't really have much in the way of money in Scotland. But that didn't mean we couldn't figure out how to have a good time. We did a lot of travel to different pubs around Edinburgh, and we would buy 1/2 pint of beer and share it as we figured out what lines we could use to try to get whatever guy was around to buy us a little more beer for that night. So there we are, we're in Edinburgh, and we learn that we have a 3-week spring vacation. Well, what are we going to do with a spring vacation? Well, we want adventure. Let's go see lots of other countries in Europe, and let's spend our last week of the vacation in Italy. So, again, no money, not really much money. So how are we going to get to places? Bus, train, ferry, oh, and then there's hitchhiking. So we had all of that to think about. We got our backpacks. We put our sleeping bags inside our backpacks. We put our gigantic platform heels, because in 1976, that's what women were wearing, these big clunky heels. They went in with these long dresses because we were going to be in Italy on Easter Sunday, so we were definitely going to church. And the last item that we made sure that we had in our backpacks was our safety equipment, our Swiss Army knives. Those Swiss Army knives, those small red knives, and they have toothpicks, and they have a little pair of scissors, and they have a can opener, and then they have a very small blade. But that was our safety equipment. Now, we also had decided that we would take turns getting from place to place. Who was in charge getting from place to place? And it had worked out pretty well for most of our trip. And now it was my turn, and we were on our last day in Sorrento, Italy, and it was Easter Monday, and it was my job to get us back to Rome, where we actually had purchased airplane tickets to fly back from Rome to Scotland that Tuesday morning. 3 hours, that's all it was going to be from Sorrento to Rome. Easy. Not easy on Easter Monday in Sorrento, or probably anywhere in Italy on Easter Monday, because it is a gigantic holiday celebration. And there were no buses running, and there were no trains running, so I figured we're going to have to hitchhike. Now, I'm going to confess that I made some questionable decisions that day. That resulted in some scary moments, of which I'm not going to share all of them, but you can always find me afterward with a drink or two. Anyway, there we are in the country, and there's some challenges that happened that day, and we don't know how to speak Italian, and we really don't understand the culture. We put on our short shorts. We put on our backpacks, and we put on our big smiles, and our thumbs are out, and we're waiting outside Sorrento for someone to pick us up and take us to Rome. And this guy comes along in this car, and he's dressed rather nicely, suit jacket, tie. We think we can probably get into this car. We get in the car with him, and a couple miles down the road, he stops at a coffee bar. And we all go inside, and he buys us espressos, which were not a thing back then in 1976 here in this country. So we never had one before. So we had an espresso, and he ordered homemade pizza, and then he bought 2 bottles of Chianti. Well, we're supposed to be going to Rome, but instead he takes another road, and all of a sudden we're going up Mount Vesuvius, because that is what all these people are doing around Sorrento on Easter Monday. They're picnicking on Mount Vesuvius. So we're along for the ride, and somewhere along the way he stops, opens his trunk, takes a blanket out. We take the food out, we take the wine out. We're having a nice meal and a jovial time together, although we can't speak any Italian. And then he says, well, I want you to kiss me, and then I want you to kiss each other. Just kiss and kiss a few times here. And neither one of us were keen about doing this at all, but we had a little bit to drink, so why not go with the plan? And we said, okay, but after that, you gotta take us back down off this mountain. I still remember that gold tooth. It's a front gold tooth. We get back down the mountain, say goodbye to him, get our thumbs and our smiles back out again, and the next person who picks us up is a fish truck driver. And he says he's going to Rome, or however we communicated that, I'm not even sure anymore. So he throws our backpacks in with all the frozen fish in the mouth. And we are sitting in this small truck, the 3 of us, the driver, my friend Jeanette, and myself by the passenger door. And we're just carrying on a little bit, having a good time, and then he wants to get closer to Jeanette. So he takes his arm and pulls her toward him. And then I'm taking my arm and I try to pull her back toward me. And so we're like having this fun time battling over Jeanette. Until Jeanette discreetly pulls out her Swiss Army knife. Now she didn't take out the blade, but she took out the can opener, and the toothpick, and the scissors. Well, the next thing I know is the driver stops at a service station, and he gets out of the truck. And Jeanette and I think, oh my gosh, he's going to get condoms. What are we going to do here? We have no idea. We're like a buzz. What is our plan going to be? And he comes back to the truck and he is grinning. And he holds up this decal for his truck that he bought at the service station that he's very excited about. So, no problem there. We went on toward Rome. We were on the outskirts of Rome. By then it was cloudy and raining. And we decided, you know what, we need to try to find the youth hostel. We have no idea where the youth hostel is, and we can't communicate with this person to ask him where the youth hostel is either. So we got out of the truck. We got our backpacks, we got out of the truck. I look over a ways, I see a subway station. And I decide, you know what, Jeanette, let's go get on that subway. We'll go into the center of Rome. maybe we'll find the youth hostel, or maybe we'll find someplace we can spend the night. So we get on the subway. And by then, we're wet from the rain. We still have our shorts on. We have some rain jackets with us, we have our packs, and we look very odd on this subway. And a lot of people are looking at us. And then I smile at a guy on the subway, which is all it took, because he smiled right back at me and came right over and said, Casa Grande, follow me. Now, I had a couple years of Spanish in high school, and I figured out that meant he had a big house. So we're gonna go follow him to his big house. It's always gonna be right, and we'll get to the airport in the morning. Jeanette has now become somewhat reluctant about this idea, but I tell her it's all gonna be fine, and she gets off the subway with me, and we're following this young man, and there's no Casa Grande. I'm not even sure he had Casa. There was nothing. And now she's crying hysterically, and she's screaming at me, and I'm screaming at this young man, and he's acting totally helpless, like, I don't know what to do with these women, and, we're a mess. And he spies another young man at an intersection, and they have a conversation in Italian, of which we knew nothing, what they were talking about. But then he motions us and introduces us to Marco. And somehow we get the gist that we should follow Marco now. And Marco will take us to a place to sleep. And did we do it? Yeah, we did. We followed Marco, and there were no lights. It was dark. There were some lanterns. There were dogs howling, and I know we walked through a junkyard or two. So we were in the ghettos of Rome. We got to Marco's little place. He unlocked his door. There were 2 rooms. One with his bed in it, and another room. Dirt floors. And the whole place smelled like urine. But we didn't care, because we were too tired. We just wanted to go to sleep. Marco seemed very nice. He went in his bedroom. We said goodnight to him. We took out our sleeping bags and our Swiss Army knives. We laid them right down next to us. Just about asleep when we hear, Gina? 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 Why no, Gina wasn't me. That didn't sound anything like my name. So that was my friend Jeanette who was calling. Saying, Jeanette's calling me. She said, I'm not going without you. So we picked up our knives discreetly, and we went into his bedroom. And there was Marco, lying in his bed. He had a comic book. It was Italian. And it was all about Barbara Streisand. Now what? That was Marco's way of trying to bond with us. He had found a comic book about Barbara Streisand. Okay. So we laughed a bit. We went back to our dirt floor. We got some sleep. At 5 a.m. the next morning, we got the heck out of there. We caught a bus to the airport in Rome. We caught it to the airport in Rome, and we flew home safely to Edinburgh, Scotland. So to this day, I still wonder what I was thinking about hitchhiking through Italy and also following naively these strange men thinking it all would be safe. I swore to myself I would never, ever smile at another man on a subway, and I never have. And I've yet to get back to Italy. Thank you.
right, Marcy Robinson is our next storyteller. Marcy is continually expanding her repertoire of performing opportunities and artistic expression. Storytelling, pottery, improv, musical improv, whatever the heck that is. Valley Players member and our treasurer, she's participating for the 5th time. And as far as springtime is concerned, weekend morning coffee is on the deck. Seeing grass and flowers awaken with color and the sound of birds in the trees.
When my daughter Katie was about 8 years old, the school had scheduled a field trip to Bergstein Island up in Lake Champlain. And I was elected to be one of the chaperones, and I was thrilled about that because that wasn't something I had a lot of opportunity to do with working. It was a beautiful sunny day, perfect day to be out on the edge of the lake. I decided, okay, I'm going to take a group of kids down to the beach where I see it's just covered in weathered shale. Shiny, flat, thin, just a beach full of perfect specimens for rock skipping. Now, I had some experience with this because growing up in Vermont, a lot of our family vacations were spent at the lakes in Vermont state parks. I'd been taught by my father, who had honed his skill over the years, and my mother, who had a competitive enthusiasm at least. So I decided, okay, here's a chance to school this new generation and how the joy of seeing a 10 skipper cross the lake, or at least try. So I look around, I explain how to pick the perfect rock. You know, it's got to fit in your fingers, it's got to be thin so it'll skim across the water. I find, oh, just a beauty. Pick it up, I take my stance, I let go with what I'm sure is extraordinary, graceful finesse. I'm shocked when I see nothing happen over the surface of the water. Not even the plunk of a sinker. I'm a little embarrassed, of course, so I turn to the left to the kids. Now my embarrassment has turned to horror because I see my daughter standing there, blood streaming down her face. Right between her eyes. Okay, apparently there was what the rock skipping community call a premature release. So I look closer, and between the blood I can see white, and I'm thinking, this is not good. And as the name implies, it is in fact an island, so we had to call the rescue boat to come retrieve us. And that's when the questions started. Oh my goodness, what happened to you? Well, here's the directions to the hospital, ma'am. And we knew the stitches were in the future. So, and I had taken my car there, so I was able to drive the two of us. Now, I don't know what happened to the rest of the kids. I was not. I think they were just happy I didn't ask to do a redo. So, anyone who's been to the emergency room knows what that's like. The barrage of questions that you have to answer over and over and over again. So we get to the triage desk. So, what brings you in here today? Well, we were on this field trip. I was trying to show how to skip rocks, and I miscalculated and hit my daughter's nose instead. Oh, I see. Well, let's make sure she gets seen by the doctor right away. Okay, so we go into the exam room. I see you injured your nose. Can you tell me what happened to you here? And Katie starts to go on to explain, and they say, and who threw the rock? Me. And you are? Her mother. That's when the look started. So, excuse me. So Katie tries to explain, oh, it was just an accident, she didn't mean it. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, how many times have they heard that? So now we have to go to the x-ray because, in fact, it was down to her bone and they needed to make sure there was no bone chips just floating around there. So the x-ray technician, oh honey, look at you, what happened? Well, my mom, we were on this field trip. In my head though, all I can hear is, my mom threw a rock and hit me in the face. I'm picturing going back to school. Did you see Katie? Yeah, her mom threw a rock and hit her in the face. Mrs. Robinson is off the chaperone list. So fortunately, the x-ray was clear. So now we're back to stitches. And I'm holding her hand, you know, I'm ready to be brave for her, being her support. And the doctor says, would you like to sit down, Mrs. Robinson? No, I'm fine. I mean, I watch surgeries on TV all the time, you know? I was very upset as a young child when I got a shot and the doctor tried to turn my head away. I wanted to see what was happening. So I'm thinking I'm fine. And then suddenly, it all hits me. What if it had been a little to the right? Or a little to the left? What if it had been another kid? Are they going to let me go home with her? Do they really believe that she's safe? And so I can now feel the blood draining from my face. And the nurse scoots the chair right in below me, just in time. So I'm like, okay, yes, that's good. So now we're all good. The stitches are done, everything's cleaned up, and I'm waiting, okay? Is the police gonna show up? Is there a social worker coming? Fortunately, all was well, and they said we could be discharged, and so we took off on our way home, and of course I'm telling her the whole way home from St. Albans how brave she was, and I'm so sorry, and she's like, Mom, I know, it's an accident, I'm not upset at all. Someday this will be a good story. So, she's 29 now, so the scar between her eyes has faded a little bit, but it's still there. So whenever the subject comes up of what happened, you know, we look at each other like, here we go again. Mother and daughter, scarred for life, both of us. One physically, one emotionally. But also bonded by an enduring love. So we look at each other, smile, and say, well, we were on this field trip.
Well, we've come to our final story, people. Aww. Next up, we have Dennis McSorley. Come on down. Dennis comes to us all the way from Burlington. He's come down to see us. He's participated in all of our story slams, as well as many other storytelling opportunities in the Burlington area. He's got one for pretty much anything you can dream of. There appears to be no end to his stories. He just enjoys telling stories and making connections with the audience, and it's always a nice surprise. As for spring, he says, I like to find the eggs. He says, I found the basket, but I don't know what. Do you mean like chocolate eggs or hard-boiled eggs that are rotting in your kitchen? So you know, okay. If you're not creeped out, you should ask him yourself later. Yeah. Anyway, his story, and again, another story that I'm thinking about churches, Dennis, here, is called It's Only a Sin If You Get Caught. Welcome, Dennis.
So things were going really fine for me. I'm an impressionable kid. I'm a daydreamer. I was the firstborn in the family. I was treated like a little prince. I had coloring books, all that stuff. Toys. Everything was going fine. And then we moved, when I was 5, back to Ridgewood, which is where my mother and father had grown up before the war. And we were back there. It was typically Irish Catholic, German, Lutheran, religious, middle-class neighborhood. And without asking me any of it, like suddenly I found myself enrolled in the first grade at St. Matthias School, which is run by the School Sisters of Notre Dame. I'll get to them. The church, it was a spectacular church. It had been built, it was a lower church that was built below street level until they could raise enough, have enough collections and hide it and build this spectacular church above it, which if you see the film The Irishman, it's featured in that movie, if you remember the Scorsese thing. I grew up there. So anyway, I'm in first grade, which I don't remember too much, and I'm in this school. No questions asked. I'm wearing a little red tie and a shirt, blue pants, no problem at all. But they seemed to want, the idea was to take the air right out of all the fun that you were going to have. That was their mission, I believe. I mean, I'm a sensitive kid. So in second grade, which is I do remember, this nun just yelled at us all day, constantly from the desk. And I went home like Willie Loynd on a bad sales trip. And I walk into the living room, my father's sitting there, and I go past him, he never talked to me. And he said, "Who you got?" And I didn't even know where it came from. And he said, "Who you got?" And I said, "Sister Leondis." And he said, "Well, who?" I repeat the name. He said, "Oh, I had her too." Now, my father's 34 years old. He's a police officer. I'm 7. What the hell is this woman still doing this? She's really against children. So you get the picture. And the idea was that you couldn't do anything. You couldn't laugh, you couldn't talk, And so at lunchtime, between the school and the church, by the way, St. Matthias, I'll give you a little background on this guy. I don't know if you know the story of Jesus. He had 12 apostles. He had a meal, a guy betrays him, sells him to the Romans, commits suicide, got dinner with Jesus. So they down one disciple. And I don't think everybody was jumping up to be the next guy. Look at what happened. So suddenly they put the names in a hat, and guess whose name comes out? Matthias. So he's a saint. Who knows how you get to be a saint? It's like, depending on who you ask, it's like 8,000 to 10,000 saints. They do something, who knows what. But this guy had his church name there. I couldn't find too much about him, except there I am, at St. Matthias. So by, and lunchtime, we could go out of the classroom. I used to bring a little lunch bucket of cream cheese and jelly and like a devil dog. And the idea was to get out and get some oxygen, for Christ's sake. Get out and run around. But I couldn't run around. You couldn't run around. These girls in the 8th grade push you against the wall. You couldn't run, you couldn't have fun, you couldn't do anything. Some of the girls had to jump rope, but basically we didn't know what to do. We were just antsy, So Richie Haydorn was my buddy in 3rd grade. Richie looked like Steve McQueen and Papillon with John Denver. He had those gold glasses. He had a crew cut. He had a tailored shirt that was hanging out. His tie was always askew. He calls my name outside in the yard. There's like, 200 kids running around. Not running around, walking fast. And he calls my name, and I don't even know where he is. And I look, and he's down 5 steps, down these concrete steps at the side door of the lower church. He goes, "Steps, come on. So nobody sees me, so I get down there with him, and the door is unlocked. It's a big, heavy door. We push the door open and get into the lower church. And we close the door. And we go down into the church. It's all dark wood, dark mahogany, dark whatever color the wood is dark. There's sunlight coming through. It's empty. There's no lights on. There's a statue of Jesus, the Sacred Heart, where he's got like his heart in his hand. And he's like this, and I'm thinking the eyes are going to move. It's like we're not moving. It's like, this is wonderful. What the hell is going on here? And we just like took a little tour, the two of us walking around. And on the sides, in the shape, I guess they designed church right across, there are these 2 side areas where they have some pictures. They have Our Lady of Perpetual. So we go over there and check that out. And there's a wrought iron rack, and it's got candles, like 10 in a row, and it's like 9 rows of candles. And there's a box of matches and a stick. So we light up the stick. And Richie starts to try to make a capital R with his D. So I'm going to do big D on my side. We're just, keeping this flame going on this stick. It's orange. We don't know. We've never played. We're not allowed to have fun, remember? stand still, don't you move, stay where you are. And we thought, you know, spoof, we thought like, you know, somebody had shown up. This is like, where'd that voice come from? We were very terrified. And we turned and look, and the altar was there, and this I don't know what's correct now, this nun was about this big. And nobody had ever seen her before, especially Richie and I. We didn't know who she was. She was carrying these linens. She was coming this way, and she put the linens on a little seat like these here. They had them on the altar, and she was walking to us. She sees what's happened here. And she takes us by the earlobes, which is their favorite way to get you to go someplace. And walks us into the sunlight, walks over to Sister Roberta, where they're wearing these starch collars, so she whispered something to them. You know, we didn't know anything about their hair or whatever they had, whatever. This was nonsense, and this is good, this is bad. And so at the end of the afternoon, to go home, Sister says, calls, just, they don't, I have to go, she hands me an envelope, it's sealed. And she says, you have to take this home, and you want your parents have decided to bring it back. Do you understand me? So I'm a dead man. This is the end of my life. You weren't supposed to get in trouble at home, much less if you got trouble in school, things were going to be worse. So I'm not in a hurry to get home. They get home. And I'm thinking all the wrong things and all the bad things and all the punishment I'm going to get and whatever can happen and all of this stuff. You know, why, you know, Richie, me. And my mother usually will back me up, and she'll go to court. She's like a vicious attorney. She'll cover my bases. And I go in the house, and she's not there. And my father was there, and he's in the living room in his throne chair. He's smoking Chesterfields and reading the paper, which is all he does all day long, basically. And I go past him, and I go up, and I said, Sister said you have to read this. And I walk into my little room, my little bedroom, and sit on my little Roy Rogers bedspread, still in the school. Figured in my last day living, this is what it's going to look like, you know. And I look a little bit because I can't see my father, and on the floor is a crumpled up piece of paper, all messed up. So I wait a little bit, I take a beat, who knows how long, and I walk back towards him. And I said, I don't even call him Dad, I didn't call him anything. I said, did you read that? And he's still reading the paper. He goes, you know, all this outfit wants is money. That's all they do. They just keep asking you for money for all kinds of ridiculous things. He goes, and now they're asking me for $2 because you lit a couple of candles? Tell them they can go to hell. So I go back to school the next day, and Sister didn't ask for a note. Nothing got said. It seemed to like not even happened. Now, I became a complete anti-Catholic all through this whole period of time. But one of the things I did was I used to wear the number 13 on all my baseball and basketball uniforms in honor of St. Matthias, who was number 13, disciple, you get it? And I thought, and he's the patron saint of all kinds of things they did here, but one of them is good fortune. And I thought, you know, here's this situation where, I don't know, you know, I didn't believe it too much. And I don't know about miracles and whether that was one or not. But I do know that my father, who's not a saint, and neither is his son, were able to make that thing move along and make it like it didn't happen. So, you know, I've sinned a lot since then, and we were told that they're always going to be forgiven, and you should sin no more. We always do, and I'm sure you do it too. But, like, you know, it's nice to have somebody backing you up when times are tough, and I love my dad from that day on. Thanks.
Waitsfield UCC for hosting us here this evening. number of people that we need for our storytelling evening. So we will do it again in about a year from now. Different theme that we will discuss at a later time, but I hope you had a great time this evening. Thank you all for coming.